It is currently September 15th. I wrote about 3,200 words today, and it's not even the end of the night. It's only 9:40 p.m. I ended up going to the library today. It's something that I've just been trying to do more often. Have you ever seen that Tumblr post where it's like being an adult is just like dragging yourself out of bed and doing things that you know are going to be good for you, even if you don't want to do it? Well, that's me. So like I've been forcing myself to go, and it's actually been working out really quite nicely. I was surprised by how much I wrote, and even the session was a bit interrupted, and I still wrote a lot, which is like really great. So while I was at the library, I wrote about 2,000 words, and then when I got home, I wrote like, you know, another 1.2k or so. I have been working on Changing States, which is my literary fiction short story. It's gonna be a novella. It's very obvious to me. I knew that it was gonna be a novella. I just didn't want to say it was a novella because I didn't think that I had like the time commitment or like the bandwidth to write another novella, knowing it would be another novella. But like I knew that I could write another novella, like if I just said it was a short story. Life hacks. It doesn't have any chapters though, so in comparison to Body Back and Hallowed Bodies, which is a bit more comparable in terms of like projected word count, Hallowed Bodies was about 16k. Changing States is currently at a little over 9,000 words. Hallowed Bodies did have chapters, whereas this project does not have anything. So this is gonna be interesting, I think, for me to revise and also to see where the breaks are. It currently does have an act break, so there's an act 1 and there's an act 2, which makes sense because it's kind of like before everything changes and then after everything changes. I wanted like a really long, obnoxious title for both of the parts, like maybe like a connected sentence or something. I don't know, me being a poet. Speaking of poet, right now I'm not actually working on Changing States. I want to submit something to a lit mag. I have been really bad at submitting this year. However, I'm still getting acceptance. I will take that. I will take it. I shouldn't say acceptances, more like acceptance, because I don't think I've gotten more than one acceptance this year, but let's find out. I have submitted oh god, this is embarrassing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times. I realized the reason I was submitting a lot, like back in 2020 and 2021, it's not because I don't have an abundance of things to submit now. I do. Like a part of it is, yes, I'm very disorganized and I'm no longer submitting short stories because I'm trying to publish my short story collection, but I do have a shit ton of poems. So part of it is disorganization. Another part of it is that I feel like I was submitting a lot, like, and I'm not gonna lie, because when I was in school, instead of listening to lectures when I was in online school, I would submit. I just feel like that was a big way, like, of how I got through, like, pandemic university, was, like, submitting a lot during class. I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, I'm just saying that that's what happened. So I saw this magazine had submissions open, and they literally closed today. Submissions close in 2 hours, that's fine. I'm submitting poems. I have not been submitting any of my poems. I submitted a poem to Augur magazine called My Past Bodies Walk Into a Room, and that's gonna be published really soon, I think, with them. I've been published twice before with Augur. They're a really fantastic speculative fiction magazine. They're like literary speculative, and they're Canadian, if you don't already know Augur magazine. Other than that, there has been no acceptances because I haven't been submitting anything. I have an idea for a couple of things I want to submit. The packet isn't gonna be like very cohesive, and honestly, I don't really know what this particular magazine prefers, if they like a variety, if they don't, I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to tell. Kind of just submitting the ones that I want to submit. One of them is kind of, I'm on the fence about, mostly because it's a really personal poem and I am afraid to publish it. I like it, and it was a really important time of my life. I gave up on submitting to this magazine because like I got really overwhelmed at the idea of like, maybe I don't want to publish this, and like 2 of my poems are about this particular experience. And so what I did is I'm just using one in this packet rather than putting both, because like I couldn't emotionally handle both. So I'm gonna submit Mary's Vacation, which is my gay Mother Mary poem. I'm submitting a poem called I Want to Entertain Like My Mother Does at Christmas, which is quite literally a poem I wrote about how I want to entertain like my mother does at Christmas, but my disabilities make it really hard for me to do that, which is really funny because I think originally it was just like autism. As the poem evolved, like by the time like it went through workshop and everything, my chronic pain had gotten so bad that it's also about physical disability now. And then another poem that I'm not gonna even say what it is because that's the poem and I don't want to talk about it right now. We will see how it goes. I'm not feeling like any of these will get published. Let me pull up my cover letter, which is so old that it has the old name of an editor that doesn't even work at that magazine anymore, that is now like a writer that I really love. I always forget kind of like what to do now, but I used to be able to submit in my sleep. I really have been bad. I remember When I was in third year, my recommendation when I was managing a magazine on campus, I had told the staff at like a staff event, I was like, my recommendation is to have 10 things at once in the queue. That is fucking crazy. And I don't know how I managed to do that. I wish that I could get to that level. Like if you have the amount of work, some people don't have that much work. So you kind of have to like tailor it to your needs. But I actually really like that goal. Having 10 submissions out at a time. Not 10 submissions of like the same piece necessarily. Like, I mean, if you want to, but like my recommendation was like 10 submissions of like different pieces if you have them. I feel like even 5 would be nice. I literally have nothing in my queue right now. Literally nothing. Dear editorial board, like customize it. And then I already copy and pasted my cover letter. So then I just have to fill out some of the information. Now I have worked for / volunteered with many magazines. And the number one thing that you need to do is read the submission guidelines. How I organize like for my cover letters, if you want an insight on how I do that, is I just have the cover letter copy and paste into a document that's called coverletter.docx. So I just quickly search it up whenever I need to submit. And I also have my 50-word bio pasted right underneath it. So I just keep them in the same document. It's very fast. Typically, magazines want your bio to be 50 words or less, sometimes a little shorter. Sometimes they can be like 150 words. Sometimes they can be 100. But I think like typically what I see is about 50 words. So I have made sure that mine is under 50. My bio is very shortened now. It used to have a lot more information, but your girl got accolades. So I had to make room. It used to have like magazine names and everything, but I don't have space for that anymore. So yay me. I just read the submission guidelines and I realized I needed to actually tweak my bio to add some of those publications back in. And something that really excited me when I first started submitting back in 2020 when I was 18. Thank God for 18-year-old Rachel. Like honestly, like she like carried my ass. I don't think that 21-year-old Rachel and all her insecurity could have handled that. So if you're watching this and you're like, I could never submit my work, just be like 18-year-old Rachel. Like, you know what? Like it's never gonna get easier. You just gotta start doing it. In future, you will thank you. I was really excited to be able to put the "and elsewhere" in my bio. So I don't have enough space because I have a lot of publications. Like this sounds so assholey. I'm just opening my CV, which is 3 pages long. Okay, listen. This is like the intellectual property of 19-year-old me, most of it. So I haven't done anything. Yeah, I want to make sure that I get like the really like recent ones or like the bigger ones. Anyway, so it was really exciting for me when I was 18 and I was able to finally put like "and elsewhere" in my bio because like I'd been published in more than one place. Like, and you don't have to write a bio that way. It's just like one of the ways you can write a bio and one of the ways I wanted to write my bio. So that was my goal, like originally when I started submitting. So the final thing I have to do is just read over the poems. I've just shifted everything into Times New Roman 12 point because that's typically the standard poem submitted. So the plan now is listen to whatever I wrote today because I wrote so much that I would just like to see how it went, especially because Changing States has been testing me. The scenes are not things that I typically write. I've been tested. I've been tested. So we'll see. I want to see how I think it actually is quite good. I've been really inspired by Cleanness by Garth Greenwell. I have mentioned this book so many times. It's like the sequel to like his more like popular book, but like I recommend reading this one. I read both of them. This one I think was better. Like not I think, like to me was better. And I'm rereading Cleanness. I literally read it like a month ago and I'm reading it again because I just love that book so much, and I read a couple parts of it already again. So this is like my third time reading some of this book. If you can get your hands on the audiobook, I highly recommend it because Garth Greenwell writes in like really interesting style. I'm not saying that it's bad or like that it's wrong because it's not. It's just a style. But like the text is like extremely dense. There's like no paragraph breaks. There's no dialogue breaks. I don't even think that he uses dialogue tags, but it's like really hard like visually to read. And if you're like neurodivergent, like it's gonna be like real impossible to read if you're struggling to like actually read it because it's incredible. Like the way that it's like formatted, the way that it's presented makes it look like it's going to be a lot more complicated to read than it actually is. Like the style is a lot more antiquated, a lot more complicated. It's not, because when you listen to it, it's actually very simply written and it's very cleanly written. Cleanness, very cleanly written. I mean, I'm working on Changing States as a personal project anyway, but I'm trying to incorporate techniques, styles, ideas that really intrigue me. Not scene ideas, but kind of vibes and stuff like that into Changing States. I just realized I have not stood up like all day. Look at my cute backdrop. We can turn this way, except the lighting is bad. Okay, say hi to Lonan. I had started writing Changing States before I read Cleanness, and the reason why I got really back into Changing States is when I first started reading Cleanness. So like from the beginning, it's just been very inspiring to me, particularly for Changing States and for Jeremiah. And so like reading it again, listening to it again has been really useful to me. And oh my God, like I understand what people say about read. I really don't like when people have inaccessible conversations about reading and writing. I find that a lot of the advice, a lot of the things that I heard when I was getting my degree were like very inaccessible as a disabled person. No. The way that the writing community tends to approach reading isn't my favorite. So since finding an accessible reading routine, which in my case, if I can get my hands on 2 different forms of the book, so the audiobook and the ebook, it makes my life easier. This is why I recommend supporting your public library, because my public library does have both audiobooks and ebooks. So if I can do that, it makes my life a lot easier. Let's say I want to study the prose of Garth Greenwell, it's easier to do that by reading it, like with my eyes, but I struggle to pay attention. So what I can do is listen to the audiobook and follow along, and that makes my life a lot easier. Okay, of course, when I'm about to log onto my computer, it's working on updates, 30% complete. It is literally 12:30 p.m. and I got majorly distracted. Basically, I was looking through my books. I've been meaning to reread this poetry collection for a long time. It's called 100 Lovers by Richie Hoffman, and I've talked about it probably on this channel before. I got it for free from my school. Literally the best thing I got out of my degree, because I loved that collection, and I've been meaning to reread it because I was like quite kind of like harsh on it, I think, when I first read it, but then like I just kept using like a lot of the quotes for epigraphs. And I realized, actually, no, like, I really liked this collection a lot more than I remembered it. So I wanted to reread it to see how much I would like it. And I love it. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. When I looked at the back, we were just talking about Garth Greenwell. 5 minutes later, I pick up this book, and guess who blurbed the book? Garth Greenwell. So, I mean, let me get you on Cleanness by Garth Greenwell and 100 Lovers by Richie Hoffman, because they're both excellent. I love writing. Like, sometimes it, like, doesn't hit me until I like become a fan of other people's. You know, speaking of fan of other people's, I love this musician named Grayson Chance. Like, there's the Grayson Chance poster right there. And I'm bringing this up because I think on his Instagram story, he posted, and he said this a couple times in interviews, that like he's like a better artist and like at his best when he's a fan of other people. And I feel that way so much, like with other writers too. Like, and I think it's something that I want to incorporate more, because it's like an element of play in my writing process where like I just can like fangirl and like enjoy the crap out of something that somebody's written, whether it's like a friend, whether it is another writer. I just love enjoying other people's work. I love enjoying my own work too. I'm also a huge fan of myself, but being a fan of other writers, I think, has been like so helpful to my process this year in particular. I mean, I wrote an entire glossa, which is a type of poem based off of a poem that was in this book called Museum. And Museum is my favorite poem of all time. I think you can actually read it online. I will link it in the description. This collection, that poem, Museum, is the reason why I wrote my chapbook When He Goes, He's Gone this year, because I wanted to write that poem. And in poetry, you can write that poem. If you want to write that poem, just put it into your own poem. It's totally fine in poetry. So anyway, I'm just really feeling excited about writing, and it's a good feeling. Like, I posted about this on Tumblr today, where it was like, do you ever like forget the noise of creating and you just are? I feel like that's me today. Like, I am so happy. I haven't been in a lot of pain in the last week, and so I just want to like focus on the enjoyment. A Changing States epigraph, I just opened the book, is a quote from a poem in his book. I believe it's called Blue Antler. The quote is, "Lately something has taken hold of me, not hunger, not shame. It is like a flower blooming in the injury." Let me read a bit of Changing States to end this chaotic weekend writing vlog. But the scene that I wrote follows Jeremiah doing something like quite unexpected. Like, something that's interesting to me about Changing States is that there are only like 3 types of scenes in Changing States. There are like Jeremiah vaguely yearning like for Harrison. There is him grieving like the death, or like thinking he should be grieving the death of his cousin, that's like the undercurrent. I spoke about it earlier. Big part of Changing States is grief and how grief manifests. And what I'm finding a lot is how grief manifests in intimacy, particularly for Jeremiah. And it's really fascinating to me because it's a lot of different exploration of relationships, of bodies, and working internally with a character that I'm getting to know. Because I don't know Jeremiah that well. Like, I think I'm getting to know him the more that I'm writing him, and I got to know him a lot better in Body Back in comparison to, like, I basically forgot he existed before I reread Mothwork in the new year. And so it's been really nice to kind of get to know how he handles grief, because even the moments of intimacy in this book are all informed by grief. The whole thing is about grief, and it's not just grief over a person, it's grief over a lost relationship, it's grief over the future that could have been in that relationship, it's grief over leaving a place that you grew up in Baltimore, and then coming back and seeing that everything is the same and also everything is different. So grieving a life that you could have had but that you chose not to have in order to build a life yourself. So, like, it's a lot of different types of grief, and it's very interesting to me because I really relate to what Jeremiah is going through. Now, Changing States is vaguely, like I've mentioned before, based off of the time when this very similar thing happened to me. I witnessed other people's grief. Grieving is like a really interesting process because you can grieve so much. And it's an interesting project for me because it feels like so much more human, like, because it's random, like, it's not like, it doesn't stick to one thing, like, it just follows the whims, and that's what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm trying to be, you know, more fun in my process. Fun is also necessary. So just because, like, it doesn't feel necessary in the plot, it doesn't feel necessary for what I need to do, doesn't mean that it's not necessary, because necessity can also reveal itself later in the process. And also, necessity doesn't necessarily need to be what's in the project, but also what helps you write the project. And having fun is a necessity, at least for my process. That is my long-winded way of getting back to what I was explaining. What happened in the scene, Jeremiah ends up meeting up with this guy that he meets on a forum named Mav. It's a really interesting interaction. I had a lot of fun kind of going down this detour, and I'm trying to do that a lot with my writing. I've been feeling like I start to get, like, a little bit more anxiety because it's, like, the last quarter of the year about, like, my career and, like, the direction I want to take my writing and, like, what I should be working on and, like, needing to do XYZ instead of this, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes it's, like, it gets, like, a lot. And sometimes it's just good to remind yourself, like, there's no rush. What I'm doing right now is what I want to do right now, which means it's what's necessary for me to do right now. So let's see what I can read. So this is the opening of kind of this moment with Mav. Before breakfast the next morning, Jeremiah slips out of the house to meet a man. He's underdressed in his flimsy floral dress shirt, having misremembered how cool Maryland truly is at this time of year, how strangely adverse the climate of Las Vegas is to change. He starts his car quickly and with a cloying feeling. It could be shame, but it feels richer, more urgent, perhaps a surge of adrenaline. His mother will be up in 3 hours to cook an extravagant welcome-home breakfast, over-easy eggs, cubes of cantaloupe, thick slabs of Canadian bacon, all his favorites. He hasn't had time to tell her he's been vegetarian since last year, or perhaps it's not a question of time, but a question of generosity, what he's wanted to offer, what he hasn't. It takes 20 minutes to drive to the restaurant, which under normal circumstances, Jeremiah would say is much too close to home to meet a stranger. But his neediness makes him careless, and that's fine. He doesn't want to be careful. The sun's barely up, invisible, except he knows it must be there. It's turned the sky a foggy blue. He feels the urge to smoke, but didn't even bring his lighter with him, let alone any cigarettes. His mother would cry if she found out he smokes, that on weekends. He prefers Dirty Shirley's and Angel Faces over Sprite now. It's not that she thinks of him as a child, but more that the last time she saw him, he mostly was, at least to her face. He'd resented that, he understands that now, her mothering, which is an awful feeling, he knows. His mother doesn't hover, doesn't push, doesn't prod. She spent the week before he left for Vegas cooking and baking everything she knew he loved. Brioche rolls, the almond cookies that were his favorite as a kid, a lentil stew her first babysitter taught her how to make when she was only a girl. She'd left everything in a canvas bag in his car, and he only realized halfway through the drive, and now he calls once a month if he tries. His younger self buried here on this side of the country. That's so good. That hit. That last line is good. Oh man. I'll see you guys in another video. Bye.